Actually,
Okay, I'm totally on board because I am so over this.
Should we get started?
of course we want to.
Okay.
Executives in film and television.
Well, thank you all for coming today to our panel. Just to make sure everyone's in the right room, this panel is Women in the Industry, Developing Film, Television, and OTT, or over-the-top video about women, a golden age in Hollywood and indie production. And my name is Sun Jen Young. I'm your moderator today. And we've got a really great group of panelists, and hopefully we'll get into some very interactive discussion. We promise, we agreed beforehand that we wouldn't talk about politics, even though that would be very lively, and the time would go by quickly.
Voting for Trump?
Or not.
Just kidding.
But what we'll do here is I'm just going to let you know who's on the panel, and then each of the panelists can spend a minute or so introducing themselves and telling you what they do, and then we'll get into the discussion. We'll have we've got a little over an hour. We've got some questions that we thought might kick things off, and then we'll leave time at the end for Q&A. And if you have a burning question in the middle, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll take your question. So just very quickly, we have here today with us Marcia Oglesby, who's a producer with Indigenous Media, and she's produced a number of TV shows, Blue, Paloma, Kendra, Susanna, amongst others. And next to Marcia, we have Marlene Sharp, who's a producer for Sonic Sega of America. I'm sure she'll have interesting things to talk about with the gaming angle. And then we have Ronak Kordestani, who's head of development for Tremendous Entertainment. Her colleague, who is in your program, Shannon Demers, unfortunately got really sick. So Ronan's filling in for her. And then next to Ronak, we have Kara Holden, who's an actress and screenwriter. And next to Kara, we have Melissa Schneider, who's Senior Vice President of Development and Production for New Form Digital. And last but not least is Mimi Steinbauer, who's President, CEO, and founder of Radiant Films International. So again, I'll just let everyone introduce themselves, but just very quickly, I'm an investment banker. I'm not that creative, actually, being an investment banker, but I work for a firm called Headwaters MB. It's a mid-market investment bank with about 100 bankers. I run the digital media and internet practice, and what I do is I help companies do mergers and acquisitions, so sell themselves or buy other companies, and also help them raise equity capital. So just a few of the deals that I've done, which have been more on the digital side. I sold RightsFlow, this music rights management company, to YouTube and Google. They're using it as their music publishing platform worldwide today. I sold Cooking.com, which is a local LA company, to Target. And then I sold Rumblefish in social video monetization to CSAC and Rizvi Traverse. And then just now in January, I announced that I sold this company, FYI Television, to Ericsson. FYI Television is in the TV metadata and content and entertainment space. So with that, let me turn it over to Marcia.
Hi. Well, like Sun said, I'm a TV producer and a digital producer, but I've also been a film producer, and I've done studio movies like Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow that actually started out as a much smaller movie and kind of grew, as they sometimes do or don't. And I've done television. I've worked with John Avnet for a long time. I started out as his assistant, and while I was his assistant, I did a documentary on deadheads entitled Tie-Dyed that actually got into the Sundance Film Festival. This is back in '95, I think, which kind of got me a little notice. And then from there, I started bringing in scripted stuff and kind of rose through the ranks in that way. Most recently, we started a company called Indigenous Media, and that has been basically a lot of digital programming. We started a channel for YouTube called Wigs. It was one of their premium content channels. And then Indigenous now, we're also still doing digital content, but we're also doing feature film and television as well. So we've kind of broadened a little bit. And Wigs is still under that umbrella. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Hi, I'm Marlene Sharp, and
I see some friendly, smiling faces in the audience. Hi! Oh, hi! It's so nice to see all of you, Sander and Arthi and Leah. Welcome. So
I don't have a cheering section.
How much are you paying them?
Party.
My title is producer, TV series at Sega of America, which is the U.S. counterpart to Sega of Japan. Sega moved its American offices from the Bay Area to Burbank last June, and that's when I started working there. And Sega is a video game company, and I have learned a whole lot about video games in the last 11 months that I've worked there. But sadly, I don't know nearly as much as my 25-year-old co-workers, who are mostly male. But I work on TV series related to the Sega properties, mostly Sonic the Hedgehog. We all pretty much work for Sonic the Hedgehog because he's the big cheese. And this is his 25th birthday this year. So I also have a background in creative development and business development, and most of my career has been working for kids and family entertainment brands, a lot of animation, a little bit of live action, but mostly animation. And that's me.
I'm Ronak. I moved out here 19 years ago because I knew I wanted to be in film and entertainment, just entertainment business in general, and I had no connections whatsoever. So I did what anyone should do, which was I went to USC for grad school because I was like, I'll make connections there. Yeah, and it worked. It worked. I got my JD MBA from USC, and I had adjunct professors in both the law school and the business school who worked in the business, and actually 3 of them pulled me aside and offered me jobs while I was there, and so I chose to go the agency route. And I worked at agencies and management companies, and I was an agent and a manager for about 10 years before I segued into producing. And I just have never looked back and love it. Worked for different companies ranging in size from, one of my first companies was Reveille, which was a much larger company that did scripted and unscripted. I went from there to a company called Tijuana, from Tijuana over to Trium, where while I was at Trium for about 5 years, we did easily over 100 digital series, I would say, in addition to doing traditional long-form television programming. And then 5 weeks ago, I became the head of development for Tremendous. So I am very excited to create a legacy there as well.
You're still in your honeymoon period, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard not to be. They're from Minnesota, so they're really nice. And I'm like, what's your game? What's going on here? Yeah.
We'll have to talk about Reveille after.
Hi, I'm Kara Holden, and yes, I was an actress for about a decade when I came here from Kentucky, and I found myself playing a lot of cheerleaders and let me think. Can I say the B word, bitches and cheerleaders? And anyway, I started thinking, I wonder if there's any interesting roles out there for, young women, and I was having a hard time, so someone said, why don't you try and write one? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll just write one. And then I was like, okay, maybe I will. So I did, and then I also, I decided to go to USC. I got my master's in screenwriting and fiction, and then started my writing career. So I've been writing for about 13 years, and I've worked for I've written scripts for pretty much every major studio, and recently have started doing a couple of independents, which has been really cool. I've got a film coming out in October called Middle School, The Worst Years of My Life, with CBS Films, and a movie called Carrie Pilby, hopefully coming out pretty soon. That's an independent with a female director, writer, producers, which has been pretty exciting experience. So, and then I'm working on my first animated for Warner Brothers.
Wow, great.
Cool.
Yeah. That's great.
I do have a cheering section.
how to follow that? My name is Melissa Schneider. I'm the SVP of Development and Production at a company called Newform Digital. Newform is a new digital production studio. We've been around for about 2 years now, going into our 3rd year. We were founded by Discovery Communications, Ron Howard, and Brian Grazer, who wanted to really get into what scripted fiction looked like in the digital space, and hired Kathleen Grace, who's our CCO, hired myself as digital native executives to really come in and say, what does it look like for, the digital world? What does a scripted series look like now? That's not just tiny television, but really cinematic storytelling for the social media generation. And so we really dove into that head first. A little bit of my background: I started after college. I went to NYU at Tisch, and then I started working for David Chase and Terry Winter and Eileen Landris at The Sopranos. Started there in the writers' room, and around that time, digital was just starting getting going around in 2007, and during hiatus, I was looking around and saying, hey, what can I do in the downtime here, and jumped on board a production for Michael Eisner and produced one of the first digital scripted series at that time for his company Viguru, and then I was hooked and never stopped producing and creating series for digital. Became a go-to producer in that space where people would say, oh, you know how to produce for the web? And I said, I think producing is producing, and creating stories are creating stories, but sure, let's go with that. And never kind of looked back, and worked for a lot of great startups and companies, and also worked at MTV and Nickelodeon when they were getting into digital and trying to figure out what that really looked like. Found my way to LA to come work for Jeffrey Katzenberg at DreamWorks Animation on YouTube Nation, which was a collaboration between YouTube and DreamWorks. Really build out what that looked like for them, and then found my way to work at Newform. And so we really focus on scripted narrative, and I discover new emerging talent, develop with them great new original series. We produce those. I oversee all production that's going on there, and then we take those out to market to sell them, and we've had a lot of success. We've done, in the last 2 years, 30 pilots, and we've sold 19 series, so we're really excited and doing a lot of great stuff.
My name's Mimi Steinbauer. I have a company called Radiant Films International. I too came out here to go to USC graduate school. I did the Peter Stark producing program, and I'm from Austria, and my plan was to go back as soon as I graduated, and that was 20-something years ago. So I stuck around and have worked for a number of companies selling some horrid films that you're lucky if you've never heard of, and a lot of really good films that I'm proud of. I worked on the Matrix trilogy, I worked on Lord of the Rings, Hurt Locker, Blue Valentine most recently, just in sort of the Oscar space. And 4 years ago started my own company handling international distribution, so that's licensing the rights for independent films globally. So usually everything outside of the US, sometimes we sell the US as well, but it's all of those rights. And the sales process is often before the films are made, that you're selling it on a script basis, and that's to raise the financing for the films. Or it's once you've got part of a film or all of a film that you sell it and you license it territory by territory internationally to either raise the money or get the money back in that the producers spent on the film. We do about 6 to 8 films per year, mostly theatrical titles that are geared towards cinema internationally. And we have Cannes Film Festival next week, which is one of our biggest markets, and our big film that we're presenting there is a promo on Carrie Pilby. So we did not know that before we sat down on this panel, so very fun. It's a small world in the independent world, and a small world when you're talking about female-produced, directed, female-driven content. It's an even smaller world.
And if we had known about that connection, we could have shown a clip, but that's okay. So thank you very much. As you can tell, I think we'll have a lot to talk about here. It's a very, very talented panel. Just before we get going, I just wanted to take a poll to figure out who is in our audience. So I have 4 or 5 buckets. Who out there is from the creative community? Do you mind raising your hands? Okay, that's good. Heavy emphasis there. What about the business side? Okay, 3 hands, 4 hands. Technology? Press? Other? Okay. That's okay, we won't probe other. Okay. So just to get going here, let's start out with the first question. It seems like there is an explosion of new content for the TV and film industry right now, for women or about women. And the title of the panel is A Golden Age in Hollywood in Indie Production. I'd be interested in knowing, do you panelists agree, disagree? You know, what are your views? Who wants to kick it off?
I'll start.
Marsha?
We talked about this a little before we came in here, but I feel like there's a big proliferation of indie stuff going on, but I also feel like we were saying that a lot of those indie companies are being swallowed up by bigger kind of conglomerates. So I think the biggest problem with indies, or really any form now, is just getting eyeballs on it. So it's hard. Marketing is a huge part of that. And I feel like the more, content that's out there, a lot of times the harder it is to find. And so that is really, to me, the biggest challenge, more than production or content. So I don't know if you guys agree or.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I work, I should clarify this, I work primarily in unscripted television. So what I've definitely noticed in our industry is, to speak to your point, is there has been a massive acquisition spree. And what that has resulted in is a real, it's been birthed out of a necessity, first of all, because television budgets are shrinking and shrinking, and so it's very difficult for an indie to push back and say, no, I can't make it for that, or no, you can't make me do all this additional digital content for free and not pay me for my time and my editors. And more networks are saying, well, then no, thank you. So when you are part of a larger corporation, whether it's a Endemol Shine Core or ITV Group, you have a little bit more leverage and a little bit more gravitas when you walk into those negotiations, and so there's a lot more benefits to that. Now, having said that, I work at an independent production company, and we've been around for 20 years, which is very unusual in that world. And what we found is that we have a particular niche that we work in that serves us very well. And so as long as we cater to that niche, we're able to not only stay afloat, but do a really great business without needing a larger entity behind us.
And I think that the independent spirit of the creator has never been more so than right now, with the bursting and tons of new distribution outlets and places to put your content, and the ability to just make things and put them up yourself. Budgets and cost aside a little bit, but the ability to just say, I have an idea, I know I can go do this, and I'm going to go make it, and I'm going to put it up on something that people can go see. That independent spirit that filmmakers in the 90s had, and everyone was just going to make stuff. Like, I think that's there and it's still palpable, and I think that the industry is starting to move in that direction and look at new emerging platforms and saying, where are the new creators of the future, and what are the new stories?
Yeah,
and that's really exciting, I think, for independent producers, new distribution companies, but also like the creator themselves.
Yes, I think there's something interesting about that overall the business is sort of splitting between the studios and the giant tentpole movies, and then you've got the indie space with the smaller movies. And when you there is something nice about, I guess, is it the democratization? There's a little bit, there are more spaces, and even just personally, I know that when I was approached for Carrie Pilby, they raised money to pay me to write the script through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And that's a new platform that if you really, really believe in your content and you have an audience in mind for it, then there are ways, in the independent world that you might be able to get this movie done, especially with, a female lead or female-driven stories that you might not be able to get done, per se, at the studios yet, although, there's hope that might be opening a little bit. But the independent world does seem to be a little more friendly towards, women-centered films.
Yep. And you can really build an audience, and I think with the studios and the networks and why people are reaching out to talent with audience is that they need that audience, and how do you reach them directly, and how do you speak to them authentically and tell stories that really reach those audiences, and the studios and the networks are starting not to crumble, but they're starting to realize, oh, maybe people want to watch those kind of stories. Oh, maybe people want to hear those kind of voices, and I think that opens it up to lots of different possibilities, whether it's more female-centric or male-centric. Like stories are stories that people want to connect to, and they call them outside the box stories,
Right.
but they're just really compelling and interesting, and we haven't seen them before. And I think that the digital space is helping creators and writers and producers explore those opportunities and prove with data and fact that people want to watch this, and they will come and they will
Finding
watch
the
it for
audience.
free. They'll find the audience, but they'll pay for it. And then how do you convert it to dollars, which we all want to know. How do you convert it to dollars? If you build it, they will come. But those platforms are opening that up and showing people that there's more out there than just what's been produced in the past.
And speaking of converting into dollars, there's a great resource that's available to everybody, and it's free, and it's YouTube Space LA. And I can't praise it enough because I've taken so many classes there, and like I said, it's free. They have a whole range of networking activities and seminars and so forth that are available to anybody who wants to create in the digital space. And then as you build your YouTube presence and you get 1,000 subscribers or 10,000 subscribers, you get more and more keys to the kingdom handed to you, to the point where you can use the YouTube Space LA to shoot and edit and stage special events. And Sega is actually talking with YouTube Space about doing a special Sonic the Hedgehog 25th anniversary cocktail party or something like that, and it's all free. Because
Yeah, that place is amazing.
It's
It's
amazing.
incredible.
And so
Huge.
they do specifically have classes on the YouTube analytics, monetization, programming. They'll teach you all about MCNs and the pros and cons of that. I mean, it's really amazing. And so it's right down in Playa
Playa.
Vista, and there's one in New York and one in Tokyo, one in Paris,
Like London.
London. Yeah, they're in a lot of big cities, and fantastic. And you can meet the most interesting people there. It's everybody from like high school students to grandparents to entertainment executives and everything in between. So.
Yeah, when we started Wigs, when YouTube started this whole initiative to get more professional content, they would require the people that got the money to actually go to YouTube school. Mm-hmm. And it was the same thing. They did it at Shutters, but it was a 3-day tutorial about exactly what you're talking about.
There's a certificate program. So if you just Google YouTube Space LA, because I took that set of classes. It's like 5 or 6 classes over 5 or 6 weeks, and when you're done, you get an actual certificate. There's a little graduation, and then there are certain things that are available to you as a graduate of the YouTube Space LA. It's like the Creator Academy or something like that. So check it out.
Oh, I didn't realize you could.
I thought you were going to say the
Yes,
Google
yes.
cafeteria.
Yeah.
That is not at the YouTube Space LA. Okay. The Google cafeteria.
So we've talked a lot about how there seems to really be an explosion of content and opportunities. Let's bring it back to talking about opportunities for women. And we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but what are some examples of how you feel the industry is changing for women today?
I did the Sundance Institute on Women in Film. There was a summit at the end of last year, and there were a lot of statistics that are available online. And they talk about they take women directors as an example, and this is mostly of feature films, independent feature films. And if you start with the premise of that 50% of film school students are women, just as a premise, and you look at the top 500 films that are released, they're less than 2% are directed by women. Wow. And the Institute is looking at where is that cliff that women fall off. And so they're like, where in that process do you lose the women and their ability to get at directing films? So that's sort of one, and they're using women directors as an example. I mean, I think it applies pretty much across the space, unless you're talking, art design or costume or something that is traditionally more female. But the rest, I think, is all pretty much in the same statistics, I would think. And the other interesting area is the Gina Davis Institute that looks at what's happening in front of the camera and how that is, the more we allow women, and there I think you are starting to see some change. The more you have women roles that aren't clearly just the homemaker or just the cook or just the whatever female, that really affects younger kids and how they see their own possibilities. So I think it's changing. I think it's changing. If it can be slowly and dramatically at the same time, I don't know. It's changing, but I think it's inching forward, but in the right direction. And I think all of the conversations that we're having at the moment, which are really a lot at the moment in the last, I think, 18 months, it's just been a very interesting topic that's gone beyond just female audiences. And I think that's incredibly important. So I think it's changing. I think all this content that we're talking about is helping that change, because there's options for women to get their stories out there without the sort of the gatekeepers that are old white dudes. So it's I think the content explosion is allowing that, and then the stories that are for women, by women, about women can get out there, and then people start to see, oh, other people are interested in that and not just women. So I think it is changing dramatically, but slowly.
That's so interesting, the dramatic but slowly. I think what you're saying, yes, there is a lot of talk about it, so that's really good. As far as, the steps that are being made for content creators, for me as a writer, or, hopefully I'd love to direct someday as well. It is interesting. I was saying, it's weird. You don't want to talk about double standards, but there is a little bit of something that I hope will change a little bit, that there are starting to be sort of more opportunities perhaps for women to be a writer or someone to be considered to direct. But strangely, it's like you have one chance, so you better kill it. I've had my agent actually tell me, Kara, on this one project, they're going to hire this guy, so they're going with you, so you really have to deliver, because if you don't deliver, then people will know, don't go to you.
And you've hurt womankind over the next 10 years, right?
Yeah, I was saying as a story, this is a true story. I went in and I pitched a really big action film and an adventure, really, more than action, an adventure that I loved. And I pitched it to a really big producer at a really big studio. And they were crazy about it. They're like, we love it. They actually said, it's the best pitch we've heard in 12 years. We're so excited. So my agent's like, all right, so what's the offer? And they're like, we're just wondering, would you be able to write it on spec? Because the last female writer we had to write an adventure film for us really tanked it. So we're a little worried about hiring someone, a woman, to do it right now. So, that's a reality. So, I'm not sure when that kind of stuff will change, but as I think more women tell stories about this, it might sort of get in people's head and realize, oh, wait, okay, maybe people, should kind of get the equal amount of chances. And if you mess up once, it doesn't mean you're going to mess up again, because you learn and you grow, and all filmmakers learn and grow. All filmmakers, my favorite, filmmaker, Cameron Crowe, he doesn't hit it out of the park every time, sometimes it's not quite there. But anyway, so there are definitely good things happening. I haven't been asked on a date and a meeting in a long time. That's a good thing.
I think there's more women, producers. This panel, of course, and I'm sure a lot of you in the room, and producers and executives in power, especially in the digital space, who, like Suzanne Daniels, is running the YouTube originals programming right now, and more women who are coming even from the traditional space, moving into digital, who are taking power positions, which also are changing the face of the industry, and not only what's getting made, but how decisions get made, and then what happens internally. And so we know internally in places there's there's red tape and things of that nature, but I think the more women producers and the more that they take over positions of power, the industry will start to change quickly. Not because it's female or male, just because these are the stories we're going to tell. This is the way it's going to get done, and that divide's going to start changing. I think from a a creator standpoint, the digital space is, making a level playing field with everybody. And there's more younger women who are saying, enough of this. I'm just going to make it. I'm going to put it up. I'm going to distribute it. I'm going to write it. I'm going to direct it. I'm going to star in it. I'm going to do everything. And I'm going to show you that I can do all of this. And whether that translates into a feature film or
It makes me
the
even
West
think of
Wing.
Mindy Kaling.
Yeah.
The show gets, canceled on network, but then Hulu, and she just got picked up for a 5th season. There's this.
The space is changing, so the rules are changing, and having the ability to just show yourself, improve yourself in different ways will start breaking those barriers down, and will also have younger women grow into those positions of power and say, no, I don't even know what that experience is like, because I just make my own movies and I distribute them and I don't care too much about that.
That's really interesting.
It's a more
feel like
empowering feel.
Women
more empowered.
understand that it's okay to
Yeah.
feel that you're worth more.
Yeah.
I feel like when I first started, I was kind of like, okay, I'll definitely, I'll take whatever. Yes, if I'm less than making less money than a guy on the same project, that's okay.
Right.
But now maybe there's a little bit more like, no, like, what?
Yeah, and you have to,
Let's talk about it.
and respecting the rules and playing within the rules, but also saying, nah, okay, I get that, but let's break those. That doesn't really apply to me. I'm going to make this, and having, women support women and saying, no, I believe in what you're making and I believe in what you're doing, and yeah, let's break those rules, but also we're going to empower you as well to take on the big roles and fail big if you're going to fail big, but let's just go big or go home and try to do stuff. And I think as development executives, and you ladies can speak to this, it's like empowering people to tell those stories, because we know that they'll break barriers for the people working on them as well.
Well, I
Well, for
think
me-
too that, I just think that with all this explosion of content that we were talking about before, people are also trying to become more focused. And I think a lot of minorities, like women, African American, whatever the category, people are trying to take notice of that and make content that's kind of directed more at that audience, which is a great thing. And I think that because a lot of people are going to these sites and watching these kinds of things, that's making a huge difference, because it is showing the higher ups and the people that finance this stuff that there is an audience. Again, our channel at Wigs at YouTube, we did all our project. It was all for women. Like every main character was a female, and we tried as much as we could to get female writers and directors. And I just still think, the big question is, how do you take that stuff and monetize it in the bigger scheme of things? And that's really the question. Because I did think there are more avenues for everyone to go out and do their own thing, but it's just trying to figure out, okay, how do we get that? How does that translate into like these big Marvel movies and the big blockbusters?
And then from my personal experience, I think back to the question at hand, which was how is the industry changing for women? Again, speaking just to my segment of unscripted, the majority of executives in unscripted are women, and so the way that things take place are just different. And it's really funny, because I was at a male skewing outlet with a male colleague, and the first 5 minutes of this meeting were all about Manchester United football team. Like, it was just like this whole thing, and I'm like, do. And then we went to Spike, which is run by a woman, and the first 5 minutes, the 3 women were in their conversation, and my male colleague was there too, we just talked about in vitro for the first 5 minutes of the conversation, and he's like, But one of the things that we touched upon in our conversation earlier, our internal conversation earlier, is again, I think it's interesting to note that the older the medium, the more traditional stereotypes you find. So if you have films, scripted features being kind of the most entrenched, it's very male-driven. If you have digital media as being the newest, it's very, I think, female-driven, if not
sure.
equal. I think probably more female-driven. And I think within that spectrum, I say, unscripted is the next youngest kid on the block. And so I think it's a lot of women. And I don't mean just women like VPs and SVPs. I mean women who are running, like Fran, who runs all of NBC Universal Comcast. You know what I mean? Like, these are powerful women in executives. So it changes the conversation.
And at Newform, we, even all of our heads of departments, I think we're probably, we skew like 90% female in our hiring, which is also bad, and so we have to balance that out. But I think I was like, oh, there's a lot of ladies here, which is great. But I think the younger the medium, there's more opportunity to break barriers and say we don't have to listen to those rules, and it's just the best person for the job and the right person to speak to the content and the right person who's going to get it done, and I think a lot of the audience online is very skewed female, and we're focused on scripted fiction, so we're definitely trying to break barriers and really break emerging creators who are female and male, but we have a lot of female creators who are saying I can write this, I can direct this, and I'm going to do this, and so we really focus on them because our content skews more female driven.
It's interesting. I've also noticed just in the time that I've been doing this. Because actually I was looking at what I've worked on, and half of the films that I've developed and written I've done with female executives and half with male, which I think is interesting. Even from the beginning, there were female executives that I was working with, but I have noticed an interesting way that women treat women changing that I think is awesome, because there was a little bit more. It's funny, I went in to sell a television show once, and when I went in to pitch, at the end of it, the woman that I pitched said, I was fully set up to hate you. You walked in those shoes, I don't know. And I was like, what? And she's like, but this is a really smart show. And I was like, thanks, But we ended up working together. But there is like this sort of like, I guess maybe there was a scrap mentality because like only so many, maybe only so many women spots, or I have to prove myself, so I don't really want to give you a hand up because you might pull me down.
Does age have anything to do with that?
Maybe, yeah. And I'm more maybe growing up and more established now, but I do think that just in general, I feel that a woman might take a chance on another woman and not be scared that means, guys are going to be like, you're going to lose your position for that. Or there just seems to be a little bit more, I do not want to use the word sisterhood, but that support, I guess. It's okay to support each other. It's okay to, to lift each other up. And not excluding men. Men make great content, obviously. Like I'm a huge, J.J. Abrams, whatever. I love male writers, I love female writers, but it's nice now that women executives aren't having to overcompensate like maybe they once did. They're a little more open to working with other women.
I'd be curious to find out if you all believe that there are special characteristics that women bring to the business or parts of the business. You were talking about how women seem to be gaining more ground in digital. Are there things that we do?
I can say that working on Carrie Pilby, it was the first time I've worked with a female director, producers, a lot of the crew, and it was heaven. I don't know. It was very interesting. It was different than maybe working on. Sometimes I've worked on a film that's been, 9 male producers in a room and me, and there's just a different dynamic in that room than there was in the room when we were working. And maybe that was also independent versus studio. The independent feeling was something nice. It was supportive. It was
and an extraordinary group of women, I think,
and
also, because I work with a lot of women, and to
interesting.
me, I'd say no. I think that there's men that bring the same good and bad qualities the same way women bring good and bad qualities.
Right.
It really depends on,
I guess it does, yeah.
on the people. I think that's a really cool group of women on
They
Carrie
are.
Pilby. And Carrie Pilby was interesting because I'm doing the international sales, so a female sales agent. Sales agents are 2 women who are selling the U.S. right. The financier was a woman, so it was a really an all women, which I've in all my years have never worked on a project that's really that came together
But
as all women.
there is power in women banding together. Like you were saying, you were the only woman, and there were, it's kind of, even if there are just 2 women or 3, and then even if that's the minority, there's just some power in having, just knowing that you've got that moral support.
That is true.
And I think also somebody mentioned the Gina Davis Institute, and I think she's brought so much awareness of not just women in executive positions or producer power positions, but also the depiction of women in the media, and so much research that's now available. But she's really gotten women together talking about these things, and forming like an alliance. And that's also what Women in Film does, Women in Games, Women in Animation, all those organizations, which all of them are open to men, by the way. You just have to be open-minded about working with women in those businesses, and then you can enjoy all the benefits of networking with women and men in these fields. But there is power in just opening up the dialogue and sharing experiences and things like that.
From the other side of things, though, I will say that I will look for men or women producers to hire for different situations. So, for example, if I have a cast that is city-based, I will choose more likely to choose a female producer. If it's a Southern female ensemble show, I will pick a male producer because those women tend to listen to a male producer more than they do a female producer. So
That's the magic of
I'm a
producing.
sexist.
That's the magic of producing. The right people for the right job.
right job, exactly,
put
exactly,
together.
exactly.
I mean, that's the other. That's the other thing. You still have to put the right people for the right job, and regardless of race or sex or whatever.
you don't want special,
whatever
you
that
just
thing
want a
is.
level
Just so
playing
you just
field, yeah.
going back. It's just like you still have to nail the movie, whether you know what I mean. Like you can't suck at your job. No, but and I think that there's just more opportunities, and so for more people to grow and be better at their jobs or better at what they want to be and grow in those things. So there's just more people available to do awesome things, I think so. But I'm the same way when you look about putting the project together. You just don't know. I mean, who's the right person? We have a female creator that we worked with who developed a show, sold a show to us. She wanted to write it, direct it, star in it, edit it, and then executive produce it. And I said, no, I don't think you can do all of those things with our money. That's insane. But I was like, let's figure out what you really want to do and what's really the important thing for you as a creator, as a voice for this. And then we hired a really great male director to work with her and really bring that to life. And it was just the right combination of it working. And it's just when you create a project, which I'm sure you all know, it's just the right mixture of the right people for that thing to bring it to life. So,
Are there differences internationally in terms of either opportunities for women or how you approach your business for doing international distribution, and if you're targeting a female audience?
Two parts to that question in my experience. There are certainly parts of the world that are much more open to having female executives. Large parts of Asia, I'm dealing mostly with female buyers. Europe depends on where you are in Europe. So Latin America I'm dealing with a lot of men in Latin America. So that's sort of regional. The female content is still challenging internationally because it hasn't, it's not seen as I don't know even how to say it, but it's seen as riskier than sort of male-driven product in the US, and that just sort of amplifies then for internationally. So international, a female-driven story is even harder to sell than it is in the U.S.
Which is
and
why
I'm talking
studios
feature
try and
films.
stay away from it a little bit. Cause
and that's certainly, but it depends. I mean, it's like in Japan, it's like, in Japan, the women choose what are they going to see in the cinemas. So in Japan, you have a real road into female-skewed product. Latin America, the women don't necessarily, and these are broad generalizations, of course. But yes, I think it's different where you are in the world. Female content is challenging most places, and I think as it starts to prove that it is, from just plain a business point of view, not even the creative, but just from a business point of view, as people see it as less and less risky in the U.S. and are therefore making bigger projects that make money and are commercial, then international will follow because that's what's driving it. Some of the local stories internationally are definitely female-driven stories. We have a lot of documentaries by women, for women, etc. So local stories can be female-driven. And female-produced internationally across the board, I think globally.
Curious, how did Hunger Games do internationally?
Pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just touching on the gaming sector, because gaming has always been a relatively male-dominated part of the media.
From what I've observed, it still is. I don't really work directly in the gaming space. I'm working on the properties that have come from games, and but I have worked with almost exclusively, except for 2 years at Disney, I've worked exclusively for international companies, Japanese, Korean, and a Jordanian company. And, you know, people in the US do talk a lot about discrimination against women and so forth, but it is so much better here than my experiences anywhere else. I've had experiences going to other countries where I am, you know, I'm going as a female executive or a female creative producer, and I'm expected to be the serving girl or open the door for my male colleagues, or you know, accept accommodations or various things that are less than my male colleagues. I've gone on business trips where I thought I was, you know, going to accept a big award from my company, and then later on I'm justifying my job to, I mean, weird stuff, weird, unexpected stuff, but getting the feeling that there is some female component to that treatment. And of course, the U.S. isn't perfect, but I'm always glad to come home after those experiences and count my blessings.
Okay, why don't we open it up for a few questions? Does anyone in the audience have a question they want to ask?
Yeah, I'm curious, what kind of content do you see that is coming, whether it's in gaming or anywhere other than the documentary film, that's empowering to women?
In terms of a digital, I will say that I am constantly surprised and impressed by the number of creators, young female creators in that space. So entire multi-million dollar companies rely on them. When you see the style halls of the world, or the, you know, who, what, wheres of the world, these are female entrepreneurs that are 15 years old to 25 years old, who are putting out content that's, a lot of it, you know, on the digital side, you know, there's tons of creators both in the male and female space, but on the male space, for example, you see, like, if you're on Twitch, I'd say that's like 80% male probably. And again, that's okay, because I don't know any woman who would watch someone play video games for 20 million views. Like, I don't get it, but I'm also 40, so. But then, you know, you have those other MCNs where it's a lot of how-to videos, a lot in the DIY space, very instructional, a lot of haul videos, and those women are doing good business. And I will say, I was really taken aback. I sold a show to Oxygen about this group of female entrepreneurs, and I operate under the model of, like, well, of course you want to be on television. And these women were like, but why? Like, I can't control my content. I get paid less. You're telling me which brands I can and cannot do deals with. What are you bringing to the table? And I was like,
And they're 15.
but it's television.
And they're,
you know? And so it's a
and they're 15 years old.
Yeah,
And they're like, oh, I own 3 houses.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm confused why I
and
just
you're
do this.
you're really impressed, because you're like, okay, well, if you're going to put these in positions on me, I'd like Universal Comcast to agree to not use Maybelline as a sponsor because I'm a CoverGirl, spokesperson. And you're like, oh, I can't, no. And they're like, well, then no deal. And it's very refreshing, because that is not traditionally how it's gone about. So I'm really excited and impressed to see, to see this new wave grow, because it's just at its nascence right now.
And to jump off of that, when they transition out of that, as they inevitably will, and say, well, how do I diversify my portfolio? And okay. Then they find me in more of the scripted area, and they're like, oh, now I want to be the star of that show, or I have an idea. I want to do this kind of series. It's more scripted, and it tells the story. They always usually start with the story of myself, but they also have these really great, amazing ideas. We're doing sci-fi. We're doing coming of age in totally different ways. We're reimagining, what some of those stories look like with this young talent that have become entrepreneurs, that understand their audience, and they're like, I got a scripted idea that sounds similar to Hunger Games, but isn't. It's just this new way of being authentic and different than the blockbusters. And we believe, I mean, in our company anyway, that a hit in those areas will change the space and will change how we make content, and will change some of these platforms into networks, into destinations. AMC before Mad Men was just AMC, and so we really believe that because we're seeing new stories that are being told that will, maybe they'll be distributed on Snapchat, maybe they're going to be on Facebook, maybe we'll take over Twitch and then it won't turn into that anymore. But you'll be able to find new and different stories that are scripted as well.
So they're really taking control of their own business models, while the industry
absolutely.
is struggling to figure out what the right business model is generally.
And they're moving faster than anybody, and as long as you can go sort of as fast as them, you can jump onto that. And I think a lot of these companies, like you mentioned before, the Comcast buying DreamWorks, when DreamWorks bought Awesomeness TV, they're just starting to see, the power of the talent, the power of the stories that they have, and the power of the audience that comes with them. We need to get in on that. But at the end of the day, as we all know, story rules and the content rules, and what is that show? It doesn't matter. No one's going to watch it. Why do people fall in love with things? Why do people want to watch things? Ultimately, why do they want to pay for it? You can, a great movie sometimes just bombs. You're like, why? Well, the people didn't love it. They didn't connect with it. It wasn't authentic. What was the reasoning behind it? Like you were saying before, Cameron Crowe or whoever. It doesn't matter. The consumer, when there's so much to buy and there's so much to watch and there's so much to do, how do you hook on? And this talent has figured out how to get their audience hooked, and the companies are coming.
Question right there.
Yeah, I just want to put, over the past 2 days, I've been hearing a lot about authenticity, something that's authentic, especially when they're talking about the influencers and the individuals who people have fallen in love with who they are and what they do. But when you're talking about scripted work, I know the definition of authentic, but it's when you're creating something from whole cloth, or you're using your imagination. What on your side? Can you describe authentic a little more?
Oh man, that's what we talk about all the time.
Okay,
That's the special sauce. That's the special sauce. How do you? But you can look at that in traditional as well. Authenticity and what connects to you through the screen, like what pops, like what grabs you, and pulls you in. It's those stories that you see yourself in there, and you get it, or you're just swept into that world. And what they've been able to do, they've been able to have a direct connection. We're like, I'm your friend. We're friends. We're talking. We have this connection. How do you bottle that? How do you take that and put it into something that is scripted and less lean in, a little bit more lean back? But you still say, well, how can I see myself in that story? How can I connect with those characters? And a lot, playing right, and you're playing. Also, we talk about, is it the way it's shot?
Absolutely,
is it the way that you look at the screen? How do you frame up? How do we get into that? The wide shot. We look at a lot of wide shots, and we say a lot. The wide shot. Enough of the wide shot. Like the wide shot is too much. You're not immersed. You're not immersed in that feeling, in that space. And it's also the voice of the content. It's how you write it. It's how you connect with those characters. And it's not an exact science, and you can play around with it in technique a little bit, but it is about the voice of what you're writing and who the people are that are in it. But Tom Cruise in some of his best movies is super authentic, and you're like, he's great. Let's really watch him. And in some other things, he's like, oh my God, who is that guy? And you don't connect. It's about connection.
Well, it's because you probably, as the creator, aren't connecting in some way.
You're not connecting.
Yeah. So there are sometimes, you might want to follow the trend, or call your agent and be like, what's selling? I just want to sell something. But that's just It's a backwards way to go about it, and it shows. It shows through.
It comes through. It's like in my business, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who they'll start businesses and they'll say, I want to sell my company like right away. And so if you start a company because you want to sell it, then people see there's no authenticity.
Yeah, what do you love?
I also feel like I think authenticity in the scripted world could also just, does it feel real?
Does it feel real?
So like, for example, you look at something, and for personal taste, this is, I don't play in scripted as much, but like personal tastes, it's you compare broadcast network to cable, for example. And so to me there's a glaring difference of like, How are women projected in, let's say, a Desperate Housewives, which is like, really, who are those, like, who knows any of those women, you know? Versus Broad City, I know those girls. You know what I mean? Like, I know those girls who'll do anything and think anything and say anything, and it feels real, even though every word is scripted. You can see some of your friends saying that. You can see someone in that coffee shop saying that. I don't see that with Desperate Housewives, you know?
And that's even, you know, transparent and new series that are coming out. You could say that's I would classify that as being authentic content as well. It's not, there's no influencers, digital influencers in that, but the stories that we decide to tell, especially as women who are creating stuff, what speaks to the audience, that's really what authentic means. And those talent are speaking directly to their audience, and that's what creates that connection of authenticity. And executives, I'm sure you guys can chime in. We use this word all the time. Oh, it has to be so authentic. It's authentic, and you hear it in lots of panels and stuff. But I think it's that connection with the audience is what they're actually talking about.
Right, why do we care?
Yeah.
Point of empathy, something like that?
Yes.
Why
yeah.
do we care? That's
Why do we
that's the
care?
first
Why do we-
question I ask when I start writing something
Why do
or
we
when I
connect?
take on a project. You know, even with the middle school one that I just did, when I went in and spoke with the director, I was like, I have to care. It's not a bunch of pranks. It's not a bunch of like this. That's great. Layer that stuff on top. The fun is fun. But what does the audience, how do they see, you know, how am I going to be reflected? How do I see myself on that screen and go, yes, I want to, you know, that somehow I feel, you know, either empowered or inspired or whatever that may be. There's, you know, you have to, yeah, that's it. It's
But I
gotta
also
feel
think
real.
the rules are being redefined because back in the day, it's like, well, who am I rooting for? If you guys watch Casual or You're the Worst, they're all awful.
Yeah, they're
And
awful.
you can't not love them.
But you
know
have
what I
to love them
because
anyway.
you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's real.
Because they're real.
Yeah,
yes,
that's-
you do care what happens to them.
And it's
Yeah.
great writing.
Yeah, it is. Those
The
are
writing
great
has to be
shows.
amazing as well. So.
And I think in the theatrical world, the old dinosaur of theatrical world, it's even more the case because then it has to be, if it's not the Avengers 9, it has to be a film that's something that gets you out of your house. You're driving, you're probably
Right.
getting a babysitter, you're probably paying for dinner. I mean, that's a
commitment.
that's a huge commitment, financial time, et cetera. And so those films, those independent, smaller films that are competing for your time against the latest 3D thing they have to hook you somehow. And that's the screenplays that we're looking for in the independent side as well, something that hooks you. And to me, it's like it either has to be big and massive or it has to be really original and something that grabs your heartstrings.
Yeah, that's
and that doesn't have to
definitely
just be dramas about dying of cancer,
Yeah.
but it has to be something that you want to go spend, 2 hours with that person.
It's the same in digital. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of stuff is popping up, and there's so much content, and there's all in SVODs, and everyone wants you to give $9.99 to every app and all this other stuff. And where are you going to put your money? That's like a big commitment. And so even on the scripted side, where a lot of unscripted talent right now on those spaces are like, let's play in the scripted side. We don't just throw all the rules out. Like, there needs to be great scripts. There needs to be a great story. There needs to be great acting. There still needs to be all the great fundamentals of what makes, a piece of content that we want to watch and we want to pay for. And so that's where the next phase of all of this is going to go. You say, well, how do you take that talent or how do you take this stuff and you say you move it into a more traditional realm of scripted content and people want to pay for it behind a paywall. It's hard,
I have one last question for the panelists. I guess they double booked the room, so there is another panel starting at 5 o'clock.
A double book.
But my last question is, what advice would you give women in the audience who want to have careers in film and TV?
Believe in your
Persevere.
worth.
Oh, I
Yeah,
would say
go for it.
persevere.
Yeah.
And speaking to the authenticity question, I mean, I think because the perseverance is such a part of it, and that's not just for women, I mean, I think that's in this business, you have to really be willing to work really hard and just stick through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that, to me, is the authenticity. If it's there because you're passionate about what you're doing, then that gets you through those bad days where you're like, this is never going to work, and then you really can celebrate in the great days when it's like, oh, that turned out to be better than I expected. So to me, it's just a lot of hard work. and love what you do, because otherwise it's way too hard.
Otherwise, there's a lot easier jobs.
Yep.
I totally agree with that. It's cliche, but it's working really hard. That being in this industry, whether you're in digital or you're in traditional or whatever, the entertainment industry is a very complicated, hard place to navigate, and you have to really love. You have to love making deals. You have to love making content. You have to love the people that you work with, even when you hate them. You have to you have to love the content, right? So when you say the properties that you worked on, at the end of the day, that was hard. But when you see it up there, you're like, yeah, we all did that collectively, and also believing that it's a collaboration. It's not just the studio executive or the person who wrote it or the director or the lead actor or the fifth lead actor. Like, it takes all of those people to create and make a story, and at the end of the day, it's about the collaboration of that, and that's why we should all be in it, and the money will follow if you believe in that collaboration.
Yeah, I think, well, that's what I was saying. I agree. Perseverance is huge. Just be so willing to get knocked down, but to realize that you really have to. It's so cheesy. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in what you have to say. You have to believe that there are people out there that want to hear what you have to say, but you also really have to believe in your worth, so that, if someone, puts you down or tells you can't make it or says, you can't do an adventure film, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, just wait, but then the hard work has to follow it up. The hard work is important, and sticking to it is important.
I would say don't wait for your opportunities, because they'll never come. Create your opportunities.
Yep.
So.
Great.
Yeah, I agree.
So good.
And it's so much easier now, I think, too, to do that, but.
And also develop your relationships, especially your friendships with other women, and be willing to help other people. You'll be relying on others to help you throughout your career, but extend that same courtesy to others, and be willing to serve as a mentor to others.
I love that.
Yeah, I saw a Facebook post just this past week, which I thought was somewhat appropriate just for women who want to have careers generally, and that was be decisive, make a decision whether you're right or not. The road of life is paved with flat squirrels who couldn't make a choice.
So good.
That's also directing. So if you
I
wanna be a
like that.
director,
I actually shared it.
That is so good. You know what? And just one last little thing. And it's not necessary, but I found it helpful in my world. I know there are jerks out there that do get jobs, but you can believe in yourself, and you can be strong, and you can still be kind, and you can still be someone that people like to work with. So I think that's important too.
Great. Well, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you for coming.